I wanted to put together another Naza how-to based on some comments and questions related to setting up your Naza for remote gains. Now in this video I'll actually demonstrate how that's done. You'll notice that I have channels 7 and channel 8 on my receiver, and I'll actually wire those or plug those into ports X1 and X2 on the Naza. If you see my previous video, I actually have a channel 6 wired into the U port, which shows different flight modes, but this is going to be strictly a demonstration of how to tune your gains beyond the factory settings. As I've gotten further into this, I want to fine tune a few things in both manual mode and attitude mode. So this will talk you through using both the X1 and X2 ports to remotely configure your gains using your transmitter. Now in my case, this is the Turnigy 9X, and what I'll do is after I get everything plugged in, I'll show you how to configure these knobs so that we can mess around with our gains in real time. Okay, we have the Discovery servo leads going from channel 7 and channel 8 on our receiver to port X1 and port X2 on the Naza. So that's step one. Now why don't we take a dive into our 9X and how we're going to configure our two knobs. I'll actually link this to X1 and this knob to X2, and we'll have these control attitude mode gains and basic mode gains respectively. Okay, so let's take a look at what we need to do here. And we'll go into our settings and we'll go down to the auxiliary channel setup, and you can see I actually have these already set, but let me just null them out so you guys can see how we start. Okay, so channel 7, we're going to, if you take a look at this up top here, hover pitch and hover throttle. Okay. So we'll go ahead and set that at hover pitch for channel 7 and hover throttle for channel 8. Hit menu to save it. Go back out. And now let's hook our Naza up to the DJI Naza Assistant and see how these control knobs actually behave. Okay, so I fired up the Naza Assistant and connected the Naza to my Mac. Let's go down to autopilot. And as I mentioned before, I have kind of the default, I've accepted the default settings for both my F450 and my TBS Discovery, and everything flies well. But let's get a little bit fancier, and we're going to work with our gains for both pitch and roll in the basic setting as well as in attitude mode. So let's start with attitude mode because that's generally where I take off. So we'll set those to X1, port X1, which will be our left knob, if you recall the setup we just did. And X2 will be our pitch and roll for the basic gain settings, and that will be our right knob. So I'm going to, now actually if you notice, I'm turning my left knob, and see if I can show you that a little bit. Okay, so that's the left knob for attitude gain, and you can kind of see it dial up and down. Now the right knob for basic, wired into X2 on the Naza. Okay, so those, you can notice if I go counterclockwise all the way to the left, I'm at 100%, and then I can bump up from there. And what's interesting is that confirms that our configuration is in place for our transmitter and receiver. And if you look at the actual manual, okay, so here are the settings for an F450 setup, and once again I'm on the Discovery, but you know, for the purpose of this demo, kind of see that our pitch and roll should be at 150 for basic and then 150 for attitude. And if we go back, we're going to start off at 100% for those pitch and roll, and toggle until, you know, tune in real time until we find something we like. Now I'm not messing with the yaw and the vertical settings. Right now I'm just more concerned about pitch and roll and having the knob, you know, because in most cases you want your pitch and roll gain to be more or less the same. So that's how this configuration works. So I'll go ahead and write my settings, and now we'll go ahead and take it for a test flight and see how it looks. Okay, before I do this test flight, I'd like to point something out real quick. After, you know, doing a initial flight, this left knob we have set for our gain on our attitude gains for pitch and roll, and this one we have for basic pitch and roll gains. Now, turns out that I thought that basic meant, you know, gains for manual mode, but that's actually incorrect. So my understanding, and just from testing and a few minutes ago, is that basic is related to just the standard hovering and stability of the quad as it's in the air. Attitude is more related to your stick inputs, you know, if you're pitching or rolling forward or back. Obviously the higher the gain, the more responsive, the more pitch and roll that you're going to see. So attitude is more related to your stick inputs, and basic's more related to just general conditions. So that would apply to both your attitude and manual mode. Okay, so let's give this a go. Okay, so I'm going to go with a basic gain, and you'll see I'll turn this up just a little bit to the right. And as you notice, as I kick it up, you'll start to see a little bit of oscillation. So you can see it really oscillating there. So I'm going to dial it back down and see if we can get it nice, and there we go. Okay, so we saw I have my knob kind of right in the position where I felt good about the basic gain mode. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the attitude gains for our pitch and our roll. And that will be the left knob. So you can see right now, if I go back and forth, pretty calm, easy movements. So I'm going to start kicking up my left knob so I can get more gain on the attitude. Kind of hard to do this. Okay, so go up. Now you're going to see the attitude mode is real responsive. Definitely more responsive than how I have it configured in just default mode. Very nice, actually. So I'll go up a little bit more. Bring it down. Okay, I'd have to say that's probably right where I'd like it to be when I fly in attitude mode. It's very responsive, and what I'll do now is why don't we hook the Naza back up to the assistant and kind of see what our settings are. Okay, we're back in the Naza Assistant. Let's see where we ended up with our knobs. For basic gain, we're at about 141%. And for attitude, 164%. Now, what I can do next is actually turn this off so that our knobs will no longer take effect on these settings. I think that's kind of what I recommend. Just you never know when you can bump a knob or it can get adjusted when your transmitter is turned off. So we'll go ahead and take those gains and write them to the Naza, and we should be good to go. And anytime, I'll leave my servo leads connected from the receiver to the Naza, so in the future I can tune these even further. So if we take a look at the actual recommended settings from DJI in the Naza manual, now given this is for a F450 with kind of stock DJI components, but in my case it's a TBS Discovery. But you can see we're 150 for pitch and roll under basic and 150 for pitch and roll under attitude, and we're at 140 and 160, a little bit north of 160, so not too far off, pretty close. I'll fly it around a while and see how those work and tune them as needed. So I hope this video was useful. I know there's a lot of work to get those settings pretty close to what we could have just done by using the Naza manual, but I hope it was useful and that it helps you get your DJI Naza dialed in. So please let me know if you have any questions or comments below, and thanks for watching.